Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. This episode, Chris Hartman coming to us from North Kakalaki. I ain't said that in a long time. North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, Army veteran. Man, I thought I had it. Chris, Screaming Eagles. There we go.
There you go.
Screaming Eagles. Yeah, Army veteran from the Screaming Eagles, 101st Airborne Air Assault. How you doing today, Chris?
Doing real well. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. And what a fun story. I'm excited to jump into because, Army dude running a company. I think you were logistics company. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aviation logistics. Was that what y'all were doing?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I did in the Army, and it's kind of relevant to what I'm doing in the scale world, but I mean, probably not super relatable. But
Oh, it's always relevant.
there was lots of lessons learned that are always useful from the Army in the business world. So.
Well, I bet, but the thing that's, and we were talking about this in the green room, the thing that's always that really just leapt off the page for me was, all right, Army guy goes to corporate world, puts on probably at least a sport coat every day, if not a tie every day. And then you had a moment. It had to have been a moment because now you're back in the blue collar world, running a business that is, it is hardcore blue collar scales, welding. I mean, American Scales, just to throw the name out there, because I want to make sure we get it in there at least 4 or 5 times for the show today. But what happened, man? What in the world? Did you just get tired? Did you get like a rash on your neck one day or what?
Well, I mean, I think really it was, my business partner, who was one of my Army buddies, we met while we were deployed. And so we had wanted to do something entrepreneurial while we initially got out in 2013. And so we had talked about different ideas and kind of tossed some stuff around, but personally and professionally, it just wasn't the right time when we got out, 10 years ago or so. And so we kind of went our different ways, and both went back to school and did the corporate world thing, and but always stayed in touch. And over time sort of figured out there was an opportunity to find our way back into something more entrepreneurial and do it together. And we sort of started that journey probably a year or two before we kind of made the decision to exit our jobs and kind of planned it out. And from there, we ended up in an industrial scale business in Charlotte, North Carolina. So
Was there something in your background that drew you more into the blue collar industry or what? Because there's a gazillion other industries that you could have kept the coat and tie on.
Yeah, I think some of it was going back to the military. It's sort of more comfortable working with folks that like to work with their hands. And we both had kind of worked with the white collar workforce for 5 years, and I think enjoyed it, but said, let's go back to something closer to home, so to speak, closer to our military backgrounds, our upbringing. And so it was also just from a business perspective, we found that to be a little bit less, probably there's more opportunity there, I think, generally for improvement, for just taking care of some of these folks that I think over the years have sort of just been looked down upon for whatever reason in some circles. And it sort of motivated us to get in there and change people's minds.
It sounds like it was a pretty calculated move on your part. Could you walk us through a little bit of like what led you to make that actual jump to the entrepreneurial journey? Because it seems like it was something you were definitely thinking about for a long time while you're sitting there at the desk job.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think ultimately both my business partner and I have been about like we understood we needed to become owners and not just we were kind of tired of working for the company. We wanted to not lead it, but we wanted to kind of mold it and kind of not only carry the financial benefits, but also the responsibilities. So there was no one else to kind of say, oh, well, I didn't have the resources or my boss made a bad decision. Well, no, I mean, all the decisions are made by us. So if there's anybody to blame, it all is on our shoulders. And that can get a bit overbearing at times, but it's what we strove for and kind of thought through. And I think ultimately we just took our few years in the corporate world and said, this is great, but I don't want to do this for the next 25 years of my life. I'd rather gamble on myself or ourselves, right? And put some of our, money where our mouth is and go figure this out. And we thought through it pretty, I would say, systemically. Like, we went through all the processes. We had a very clear plan. I mean, it involved moving our families. We were both living, not in Charlotte at the time. I was living in Philadelphia and my business partner was living in London. And so we had to, the first step was convincing, our current wives and families that we should uproot them and their jobs to move to a new city where we wouldn't even have a job, really. We'd be hopefully going to find a company to buy. And that was kind of the first step, was convincing them. And if you can convince your wives to do something, we thought that was probably a pretty good first step. And so we kind of went down that path, and there was a lot of other secondary and tertiary kind of business processes that had to be set up. But it was really kind of starting with the family and going down that path from there.
Yeah, making that first sale to your wife, that's a very important hurdle to make, when you're going to make a leap, because, I mean, come on, you had a pretty cushy job. I'm sure the money in the account, it was kind of I go in, I work, I leave, I'm done, kind of that sort of lifestyle. And now you're going to say, well, let me just throw that out the window and we're going to go 24/7, honey.
Yeah.
And no income.
Yeah. Oh, and you need to give up your job that you've worked for to follow me down here after you followed me in the Army for, 8 years. So.
Ooh, a double bonus.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta, before we go too far, I gotta throw in, this is, and this is exactly what I was thinking. This is micro dirty jobs. It is taking care of the guys and the gals who do all the stuff that we take for granted. And I remember when Camden was in high school, which for me doesn't feel like that long ago, but I know it was a while ago. But I remember that attitude had developed very strongly in the kids that weren't going to college, and how they were lesser class, and how wrong. I mean, I'll do the foot stomper right now, and how wrong that is. I mean, man. So I want to kind of go back into that, because you said something that more opportunity to help. So what are you doing to better your team, if you will? Because that's what I heard, whether you meant that or not, but that's what I heard.
Well, I think first off is just professionalizing it. So a lot of these blue collar kind of industries they're sort of run like, and it's not a bad word, like family businesses, which are really good things, but they tend to be it can be very territorial and drama filled because there's so much family in them. And so some of your workers just, they feel like it's just drama filled. And so we came in and said, look, we're not family. We don't know anybody here. No one here is our brother, sister, son, daughter. We're here to make sure that our customers are taken care of and our employees are fulfilled financially, in any other kind of way that, work can provide that. And so we started with just simply like sending them to training. They're real basic, right? So everything else was just, we'll teach you, go follow this guy around for a year and you'll learn how to fix a scale. I mean, it worked, I guess. I mean, the founders of the company were two military guys, and, they grew it, but I think they got it to the point where it wasn't going to go to the next level unless you started to sort of really invest in your people. And so we always can do more. So we send them to training. We pay above market rates. So that's something we've kind of just figured that reducing turnover was important. Even with that, we have turnover, especially right now. It's a dynamic employment market. And the other is just empowering them. I think the biggest was that is they used to be very micromanaged to the nth degree. They didn't feel like they could really make any decisions. And so when we came in, we didn't know anything about scale. So we had to rely on them because it wasn't like we could make a great decision. We didn't even, half the time they would be using terminology we weren't even familiar with. And so we sort of have just pushed the onus and responsibility down to them, not in a negative way, but that they can really own the relationship with the customer, that if they need a part or whatever, they can call and get it. They just can make decisions without having to call to, the boss man every time. And some of them really have enjoyed that. And they may not tell you that, but they sort of have found that they can go a whole day and, not need to call back to the office and get approval. And they fixed, 7 or 8 scales, and customers are calling in saying, Joe was great today. You got everything fixed. What a great tech. You guys are lucky to have him on your team. And so that's one of the big things that we've sort of tried to do, is just push the responsibility and that decision making to the front line. They're the ones that are standing in front of the scale, not me. And so if they think it needs a part or this needs to be done, they're the best decision maker there is. And so we've sort of pushed it that direction.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, a fundamental aspect that I think a lot of people miss is, when you micromanage like that, it kills the creativity there. And then it really kills, when you don't have that responsibility, it kills that motivation for somebody to go do their job and to, really own the outcome like you're talking about. And that kind of sets me up for something I was really curious about. Sorry, there's one death. In this kind of an industry, with engineering the scales and everything, that seems like it would be pretty a stagnant level of innovation there. So how have you approached that from the owner's standpoint of trying to move things forward on something that's probably, been relatively the same for the last 20 years or so? And speaking from the ag biz background, not the engineer background,
Yeah.
I gotta say.
Yeah. I mean, we're not, we're very different in our industry because of our age. It is a very old boy network, if you want to call that. It's not in a bad way. It's just folks, generally the owners of these companies, have been in it 40 or 50 years. They grew up in it, they started it. And so it's a very close knit network. And because of that, though, there's minimal innovation because they just don't see a lot of interest in investing in the future, because most of them are getting ready to hit retirement or already are. And, they're very comfortable and they've got a great business. And so they're not probably willing to risk their time and their capital to probably push through to the next kind of upcoming technology. Whereas, the first thing we did was come in and get rid of, our entire business was run on, what we called analog. Everything was handwritten on paper. So we had to process over, I think, 7,000 individual paper work orders our first year. Each one had to be individually priced. And so every weekend, that's what we would do for hours, is go through them, price them, and then they had to be typed up by one of our accounting folks. And so we just said, this isn't going to work for very long. And we did it for about 1.5 years and said, we're going crazy. And so we put in a full ERP system with tablets. So our technicians in the field now can do everything from a tablet. There's no written work orders. We used to have work orders fly out of people's trucks. And I'm thinking, there goes $2,000 or whatever amount of money, or they left their clipboard somewhere. And these are the real stories, or I drove over it with my truck and it got in the mud and now I can't read it. And then we have another office in the eastern part of the state, and they were actually mailing the work orders in to us in Charlotte. And so, I mean, we wouldn't bill somebody for 60 days. And so it was just really an antiquated way of doing business. And so just going to something like a digital solution for our tablets was like a revolutionary thing. Most of the other scale companies don't have that. A few do, but very few. The other is marketing. We're big believers in content marketing. And so we've really leaned into that pretty heavily. And it's a huge opportunity area that we continue to kind of leverage. And so those are really the areas. Now, when it comes to the actual technology of the scales, you're right. It hasn't changed in 20 years. And I shouldn't say it hasn't changed. There's minimal innovations. And so, we're not really pushing forward and saying we need new load cells and new this. The manufacturers do some of that, but really, if you step back and get out of the scale world, the things look exactly the same. Like if I had been asked 10 years ago, like, does this scale look different than this one? I'd be like, no. Now I might say, well, there's some slightly different features, but not really.
Still a platform with springs and weights, right?
Exactly. Well, and we're a service company at heart. So like when it comes to products, I mean, we're a dealer for them, but ultimately, like, we just want to provide the best scale for that customer, whether it's X brand or Y brand or whoever. And then we want to service it for its lifetime, calibrating it, servicing, whatever is needed.
I think that,
you talk.
I was just going to say, I think the thing that I thought was really interesting, and you've kind of touched on it, but I want to go back into the intentionalness of it, and almost when did you notice that the culture of the organization had changed? Because you mentioned we're more of a service company, and I'm going to guess that the previous owners, they didn't look at it that way. And then how you treat the employees is another aspect of that culture. When did you notice, or when kind of looking back on it going, hey, these guys get it?
Mm-hmm. I mean, some of it was actually bringing in new folks and letting some folks that probably weren't the right people for what we were trying to do kind of head out their own direction. And so some of it was just, we had some natural attrition, but it allowed us to promote from within some folks that just had never, they'd just been held down by the kind of the top heavy structure. And so we, as some of that moved out, we were able to bring up some folks that have really performed great. And I think that's when the culture sort of started to shift, was that somebody that had been in the company for 6 or 7 years as a technician is now a manager leading a branch doing, 7 figures. They're like pretty pumped, and they're just doing an absolutely great job. And the culture, they're now the culture bearer, standard bearer. They're the one that can hold it up. It's not just my business partner and I that have to kind of, put the culture out there and be the steward of it. They are as well. And so that's probably happened in the last year. So it's taken 2 to 3 years to really kind of work through it. And it wasn't a bad culture when we came in by any sense. But it was one that needed a little bit of I would call it like a refresh. And so the refresh took a few years, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. And I think it goes back to just bringing in folks that want to be here, that are excited to come to work, and the folks that continue to be loyal, making sure you take care of them, and whether that's new roles or compensation, or in our business, like a new truck is a big deal. These guys spend hours and hours and hours driving all over the place. And so a new truck, it's like a new office or a new desk. It's looked at pretty highly. So we try to take care of them in that respect too.
What I was going to say there a second ago. So, we talked at the beginning about, kind of the lure of entrepreneurship being like being able to own the responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
As more of a service company, you don't have the full control on the outcome necessarily, because you're using other products and manufacturers there. How have you balanced that as an owner to still be able to provide that, premium experience?
Well, first is to have a number of different manufacturers you represent. So when one can't provide a part, you've got a secondary and a tertiary and another guy that you can go get it from. The other is just being straightforward with your customers and telling them this isn't the right product for you. You trust us to service your scales. I'll sell you this if you want it, but I'm recommending you go with this other one for this reason. And we've built relationships, and a lot of them were existing before we came, that our customers will trust us when we say, I know you think you need this. I'm recommending you don't. Here's why. And sometimes they'll listen to us. I would say the majority of the time. Sometimes they won't. And we'll come back, and generally, we won't say told you so, but we'll get them into what they need to be in. But for us, it's having a number of different manufacturers, so you're not sort of stuck with one. But we have really strong relationships with the ones we do have, and we've built that by we go to all the factories where they build the scales. They're mostly in the Midwest, in Ohio and Wisconsin, and so we go and see them actually making a truck scale and welding it. And you can really start to feel the culture of some of the manufacturers and their products when you go visit them. So we've invested quite a bit of time going up and seeing it. And those are really good stories to tell the customers too. Like, oh, well, you even know where the scale is coming from? Oh, I can tell you exactly where it's coming from. I've been to the factory. I've seen the guys that are welding it together. I can tell you about, a whole bunch of other stuff in the little town where it's located. And so we found that to be pretty beneficial as well.
Mm-hmm.
In that same line, I thought something was interesting because it's the same sort of thing has been the downfall for a lot of businesses. but I thought it was really interesting, the number of things that your small business provides as a services industry. I mean, folks, when you go on the website and you click the services drop down, it's like almost top to bottom. That's what these guys do. And so many businesses fail because they try to do too many things. How do you manage, you and your partner manage all that capability?
Well, we've added a few service lines. We've also tried some that failed pretty bad, and they're not on there anymore. But we're definitely a test and learn type of folks. Like we'll put a little money and some effort and some time into it, and if it catches fire, then we'll go with it. The other thing is we just listen to our customers, and when they have friction points that we hear at multiple places, then we say there's an opportunity there, and then we figure out, do we have the right folks to do the work? Do we have the right equipment? If not, what's the investment look like to do that? One thing we've kind of started to work in is metal detector verifications. And so we're in these manufacturing plants and food production plants, daily, and they've got metal detectors that have to be validated by a third party. And there's very few service providers. The ones that are out there are usually the manufacturer of the metal detector, and they charge just exorbitant rates, and they make you come on site to do it. And so we said, well, what if we just did a virtual? I mean, COVID's pretty much opened the idea that you can do things virtually. And so we're doing it virtually. Person FaceTimes with us. We do all the paperwork. We validate everything on, over a video feed. And it's a great service for them. We can get it turned around in a week, and it saves them significant money. And we've developed a nice little service line that is really a low calorie effort for us. And so that's just one thing we've sort of gotten some traction on. We've started some other ones that didn't go as well, and sort of gotten out of those. But ultimately, if you think about the different services we provide, it comes back to our technicians are just really well-rounded. They're folks that just grew up on a farm, or they grew up somewhere where they can just work with their hands. If you need them to go pour a little concrete slab, they'll do that. Then they can probably weld, even if they're not a welder per se. They can go fix a scale. They can do electrical work. They can work on, any type of pneumatic device. And so a lot of times we can just say, I think I've got a guy that can work on this. And then we go give it a shot, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then if it's working, we sort of pour a little gas on it, put a little marketing dollars towards it, and see if we can make it go a little faster.
With that test and learn process, which I love, was there a time earlier on in the business where maybe the tests weren't going as well, or you're doing too many at once? Kind of that same type of trap you were talking about, Dad, where it's like you want to put out all the products at once because you know that you have those capabilities inside your team, but then the delivery is where it gets a little bit muddied. What was that like in the early days?
Yeah, at the beginning we were trying to do everything. If anybody asked us to do anything, yeah, we'll do it. And it sounds good. You're sort of just chasing revenue, and everything's exciting. So you quickly find that you move away from your core competency of, in our case, fixing scales. And we sort of dragged ourselves back to the middle and said, look, we need to fix people's scales. We need to make sure they're weighing right. That is what we do. If we can do these other service lines without impacting that main component of our business, great. But as soon as it starts impacting that, then we're not going to do it. Or we're going to significantly reduce it so that if we have time to do it, we'll consider it. And it was hard. I mean, there were things that we thought were going to be great. We leaned into one around doing services for like storage, like a public storage, different kind of storage places. And they have all types of gates and different low voltage electronics that have to be fixed. There's lots of welding involved. And so we really thought there was some opportunity there. There still is, but it was one of those, like, they had so much demand, we couldn't meet it, and their timelines were crazy. And there was just some new things we needed to learn. It was like, this isn't the right time to do this. But the cool thing was we did identify a niche that I think at this point has been unmet. We haven't figured out how to go get after it yet, but we might. You just got to be honest with yourself and say, like, at the core of what we are, is this new service line distracting us? And figure out how much distraction you can take on before it becomes detrimental to the company.
And the thing is, with those ideas, you can still leave them on the chalkboard or the back of the book or wherever. And you can always be thinking about, when's this opportunity going to come? When does it make sense for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had one where we kind of fell into some cryptocurrency services for our welding company, and it seemed a little out there at first. And before we knew it, it became, almost our biggest customer for the welding division in 1 year. And it ended up fitting perfectly into what we needed to do. But had somebody sort of pitched it to us, at the very beginning, I probably would have been like, nah, this is probably not what we want to do. But we kind of assessed whether we could do it, and then said, all right, we're gonna try it. And that time it worked out, which was great. So we try not to say no to anything before we've sort of really thought about it, or even dipped our toes in and gotten the feel of the water. And then that's just sort of how we are generally. We like to dabble in a lot of things, which I think the risk is like you've kind of identified, you become a master of nothing and sort of okay at a bunch of things, which isn't always a great place to be either.
Yeah, and I think I really like that attitude of, here's our core competencies, but you know what, we got a guy that could probably make that work, even though it may not be out, but I'd be interested when you have to make that call. Is it an existing customer, or is it, Bob's Bricks down the road that you've never done anything with, that calls you up and says, hey, Chris, what you got going? Can you fix this?
It can be both, but we're definitely more inclined, if it's an existing customer, to try it. Just generally, just the administrative stuff that takes to setting up a customer and getting them, like, that's all taken care of. So like, I like to be able to say, okay, we can try this. We already know the point of contact. We probably have a relationship, so we know if they're a customer that you even want to think about doing this for, because maybe they're just super needy and doing more for them is probably not what you want to do. Or this is one of our best customers. They're great to work with. They're a great teammate. Like, we definitely need to do this for them. And we've had a few of those. It also comes down to capacity. If we have some excess capacity, I'd be more willing to sort of take a flyer on a new customer coming in the door. And that kind of depends on staffing levels and other projects going on. And it's very dynamic.
So you already mentioned one example earlier, but I was wondering, what other ways did y'all innovate with the virtual aspects over the last couple of years? Limiting the in-person. You already mentioned, bringing the iPad. So you're definitely looking towards the technology side of things. What did that look like over the last couple of years?
Well, a couple of things we've done have been more like employee facing. So, our employees didn't even have emails when we started. Like, that's where we started. The welding division didn't even have a computer. So the manager in the welding area there was no computer. There was no emails, there was nothing. So some of it was just super basic, like bring in a computer, get them set up, step one. But even that, I mean, big gains when you're coming from zero to, something as simple as that. But we set everybody up on email, Google Drive, so we can share documents. We have mapping features for our technicians so they can see what's going on. Even from a virtual perspective, we're ISO 17025 qualified, and we have to have an annual audit with our kind of inspector. And so normally he would come on site, and so we sort of pushed them, like, can we do a virtual? They had been thinking about it. We said, no, like, we should definitely do virtual. And so that it was usually the guy would be here for 4 days. Instead, he did it in like a day and a half virtually. And so it was a big time savings. He didn't have to fly across the country. We didn't have to host somebody here. And I think the quality of the inspection was just the same. We walked around with a video camera, just like you would have seen if he was here. And so that virtual stuff, has really helped us. We do safety meetings. We do it all virtually because we've got multiple offices. Everybody can get on their phone or dial in and see each other. And then the other piece is, kind of going back to the lack of technology innovation is there's a big disconnect between scale hardware and scale software. And we're working with a company that's sort of figured out how to bridge that gap with an iPad type of tablet feature for truck scales, where you can weigh trucks in and out without all the hardware that's normally involved. And so we've been partnering with them. It's been quite a process. We've got one in the field, sort of beta, and it's funny because a number of other scale manufacturers like passed over working with them. But we said, well, at the end of the day, we're the ones that own the customer relationships. Come on over here. We'll go take it out there and tell you if this thing works, and we can give you lots of good feedback. And so we're excited about it. Hopefully it'll kind of get a few more bugs worked out, and then we can push that out to the folks.
Going a little more forward looking with that, is that something what kind of impact do you see that having in a bigger picture? And do you see anything else on the horizon as far as, any big changes possibly?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the big ones, I mean, it's kind of, inside baseball type of talk, scale talk, if you will. Generally right now, to have a legal for trade truck scale, which means that you're buying or selling some type of commodity, whatever it is, it has to be a full length, whether it's 70 feet, 100 feet, so that the whole vehicle or truck is located on the scale platform. And it's regulated by the National Institute of Standards, and they have a handbook, and there's a bunch of rules, but they're thinking about changing it to what's called weigh in motion, where you would have just a small little pad and the truck drives over it, and the software these days can actually, even while the load is going across this pad, dynamically add it all up. And so this would be a huge change in the industry, because the cost of one of those is probably 5-10% of a full-size truck scale.
Oh yeah.
So
Wow.
that could be a real game changer. We'll see how where it goes, but I think that's probably in the next 5 to 10 years. It's already in Europe. It's in parts of Asia. So I think it's probably just a matter of time before the regulators sort of say, okay, let's try it. And so we're trying to lean into it, but we'll sort of see how it plays out.
Oh yeah, I can just think, I mean, gosh, folks, if you ain't ever been on a truck scale, it's kind of weird, because it's just, at least the ones I've been on, this big floating platform. You can actually kind of feel it move as you drive onto it. And that not only is that expensive, but just you're taking up all the space too. And you ain't moving it nowhere once you put it in either. I mean, it's going to stay there, right? I mean, to think about that, that's a huge technology leap to be able to do that. Wow, I can just, so many different things, from airfield ops, going back to the good old days, to just the weigh stations on the side of the highway. Wow.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, we actually check all the scales at Fort Bragg, and they actually have some of those scales. Now, they're not legal for trade because they're just using them to load the aircraft.
Right.
But it really could be a game changer. There are certain states that are already doing it. So if you're driving over, I think some northeastern states have actually installed some of these at their weigh stations. Now, what they do is they pretty much say, oh, you're overweight, and then they make you drive to an actual legal for trade full-size truck scale. They sort of use it as a filtering mechanism, but at some point they'll get them accurate enough that second check isn't going to be required. And so we'll see how that all plays out. But I think it's all good for, our perspective is that's just opportunity. We tend to sort of lean into things like that. And so we're excited for changes like that. It jostles the market and provides opportunities. And so we're hoping to get some manufacturers that provide those and have those relationships now, so that if that change comes, we're already well read and can go, take some action on it. So
yeah, I mean, just my little knowledge of that industry, that's a game changer in the just the square footage area and everything else, man.
Mm-hmm.
I want to add on before we change the subject here, just out of curiosity, what rough ballpark, Chris, what kind of weight are we talking about on one of those big old scales? Just because you said it's about 5 to 10% of the size of one of those, just to give us non-engineers an idea of what we're looking at scale wise.
So like a standard 18 wheeler is allowed to weigh 80,000 pounds without being overweight and needing permits in the US. So a lot of them, that's sort of the standard weight that they'll have on them, but they're all usually rated up to 200,000 pounds. We do some that go up to 1 million pounds for mining trucks. Like we do some stuff for some folks out west, and they're putting the Supermax Cat giant behemoth dump trucks that are pulling iron ore out of the ground, and they can weigh up to 1,000,000 pounds on those scales. So pretty crazy.
Wow.
Man, yeah. You forget how big those things are, man. And
Uh-huh.
you know, we've all growing up, you know, all seen the pictures of wow, look at the cool big truck. Until
Uh-huh.
you stand next to one of those and you can't even touch the rim, you know, because the tires are so big.
It's crazy. It really, I mean, that's the other coolest part about the scale industry is that you get to go to so many different customers. I mean, this week I was out at the airport, so we do scales there. We go to the racetrack. Racing is real big here in North Carolina. So race cars are weighed. We could do the North Carolina Zoo. So we go check on animals. And then we go to poultry plants and rock quarries and dumps and manufacturing plants
Wow.
and the seaports everywhere. So that's my favorite part about the business is getting to go tool around in all kinds of random places I never would have gotten to go before and sort of learn a little bit about them.
Right. I completely forgot. I mean, they gum NASCAR, all those cars, man, they weigh them before and after the race. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
yeah. I mean, I was stuck in the semi tractor sort of world, but man, there's so much more to it than that. So I want to jump back in the history books because you kind of talked about it very early on when we were talking. What's a lesson you pulled from your time with the Screaming Eagles that you still kind of go back to today? That's like been that foundation.
I think mostly taking what looks like a never-ending operation and breaking it into small pieces and being able to sort of feel comfortable that you're not trying to walk a marathon in one day. That you know, whether it was in the Army, like, all right, look, we need to, before the deployment, we need to pack our stuff up. All right, we did that. Now we need to get over there, and just feeling comfortable that in 2 days you're not going to complete everything, and you should set some realistic goals. So in this business, there really is no end point. As you know, there's not a, well, the deployment will be over, I just got to get to that end, and then I can go home and relax. And so we sort of take things in quarterly chunks, and so we set goals every quarter, and you know, we really drive hard to hit those. And then when the quarter ends, you know, we feel pretty good. Hopefully we've met a number of them, but kind of just trying not to you know, boil the ocean. Just take a big operation, break it into smaller pieces, and concentrate on those small pieces until they're complete. And before you know it, the whole operation will have sort of gotten to where you want it to go. It's easier said than done some days, but it's one of the key things I sort of learned in the military was, you know, look at this, take all the small steps, put them together, and before you know it, you'll have probably walked a really long ways.
Yeah, yeah. As opposed to no, I'll just stay here till I get it done. Well,
Yeah.
Good luck.
Exactly. It can be Groundhog's Day, and that's not good for anybody.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, kind of on that same subject, what does your military connection look like now? You already mentioned some of your work with Fort Bragg, hiring some veterans. What does that connection look like for you now? How are you looking to, you know, kind of feed back into that process?
Sure. So we hire veterans. We've got veteran spouses working for us. And then we definitely lean into trying to have military contracts. And that it definitely helps. The military is a great customer. They're not great at paying, not because they won't pay, but just trying to get the paperwork ready to get paid can be an absolute nightmare. And so we also just lean into the military community. You know, North Carolina is a really strong military community with Fort Bragg and Lejeune and a number of other Air Force bases here, particularly in the eastern part of the state. And so we just try to be around them, and we're always looking to hire folks. And so it's pretty simple. It's just be involved and be around, and you'll find some good folks. And it's kind of as simple as that for us. Luckily, a lot of the skills somebody learned in the Army or the Air Force or whatever, they work pretty well in the scale business. You know, you need to work independently. You need to be able to kind of work with your hands to a certain extent. You got to have kind of irregular hours. And so there's a lot of aspects that we really, you know, try to correlate to somebody that's getting out to say, look, if you liked those aspects of the military, like we can offer those without, you know, maybe being deployed for a year or something that maybe you're trying to move away from. And so we've had success there for sure. We've got a number of I think we've got 2 Marines, 3 or 4 Army guys, an Air Force guy, so a little bit of everything.
That's awesome. I love that you focus on the vet community, and yeah, that's always, warms my heart, and great to hear that part. Very important for us here with Tribe and Purpose and the Cam and Otis show. We're advocates of that. So I appreciate hearing that, along with the blue collar world, which I think is just, there's something else there that's going on. And I can't tip my hand for the lesson I learned yet, because I got to get to the question of what did I learn, so that I can tell you what I learned, because I'm kind of excited about it, because and I'll just let you know in case you ain't figured it out. Yeah, I'm a bit of a micro fan. I love what Mike's doing.
Oh, he's great.
With the dirty jobs, and it's okay to get your hands dirty, because you know what, somebody's got to get that stuff done. You better be thankful that somebody's doing it for you. So for
you don't look much like Mike Rowe anymore. I got to be honest, Dad. We used to always make that joke. You guys kind of split. You guys used to be like full doppelgangers.
I can see a little bit of it there for sure. Yeah.
We before the mustache, I've been stopped on the street.
Wow.
And people said, Mike, of course I'm walking, come up, tap me up, Mike Rowe. No. Oh, come on, man. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Yeah, believe it or not.
Mike, I got some pig shit to shovel.
Yeah. Well, Otis, you said something early on, I think, around like the blue collar piece, around, folks that don't go to college tend to be looked down upon 10, 15 years ago. And I think I was, I think back to myself, I've got some cousins that are all plumbers. And, I think back to when I was in college, I was sort of like, I don't know what they're doing. Like, why aren't they going to college? And I sort of think, man, I was one of those people, right? And it sort of has taken some years to sort of look at it slightly differently. And I look at them now and go, they are doing just as well as I have, and they didn't need to go to college or anything else. And I think the longer we go down this path and sort of illuminate the work that folks in the blue collar industries do, and the work, how vital it is just for just living in a country, whether it's, our utilities, our water, our electricity, all those things that people just, I think sometimes you have to take things away for them to appreciate it. And we've had some things taken away over the last few years. And I'm hoping that there's a shift back towards folks, not putting people in two camps, whether you went to college or you didn't, because I just think that provides very little value to either side and just generates a big wall between the two that is of no great service. So I'm hoping that I've kind of changed my tune. I know I have, but I'm sure there's lots of folks that haven't as well, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I know I changed mine several times over several years in various aspects, whether it was, in the Army working with the NCO Corps and the Green Berets and the caliber of guys that were there. And several of them, I'm like, holy crap, I'm glad you're an NCO, because I'd never get promoted competing with you. that sort of caliber of guys, and then as a high school rugby coach, seeing that same sort of thing and watching guys, that diversity and who they were and what they were, and struggling with what to do, because everybody's been drilling in their head, go to college, no matter how much money it's going to cost you, how much in debt you're going to do, and all this sort of stuff. And watching those kids that shouldn't be going just struggle. And it broke my heart. And
the other weird aspect to it, and Chris, you kind of just made me think of this. I don't know if I ever really put this together, because we talk a lot about, you were saying earlier, Dad, looking down on people for not going to college. It's so weird how we put it into two buckets. Like, it's college and then not college. And the not college, we don't look at it as trade school or anything else. It's like flipping burgers. Like, it's like mentally we just write it all off as it's like it's either college or it's flipping burgers, even though that there are some people who barely made it through high school and are off flipping burgers, not doing too well now. But there's also so many people that went off and did the trades, like you're talking about your cousins who are plumbers, and they're crushing it a lot better than a lot of people I know who went to college.
Yeah. Well, the two owners of this company that started it, they didn't go to college. They were both military folks and just started it, and grew it to a sizable business. And they didn't, that was another realization. Like, you just got to work hard. You got to have a little luck along the way. And, when you see an opportunity, you really got to just pour some gas on it and go for it and bet on yourself. And that's sort of what the owners here did. And, we're lucky that they did, because it provided such an opportunity for us to kind of come in and take that foundation that they built and then kind of build the next level of the structure on top of it and kind of put our mark on it from there.
Great, man. And now back to what I was saying before we chased that rabbit, which was a good rabbit to chase, by the way. And what did I learn is in these industries, not just your industry, not just a scale business, but in the grander blue collar world, there's a lot of old boy stuff. A lot of mom and pop shops started in the 70s and they're outgrowing, right? 70s and 80s. Yeah, probably that right. Yeah, I'm doing the math here. And they're outgrowing it. And there's a lot of opportunity there. Not necessarily just for the college whippersnapper guy who knows better, but no, for people who have different opportunities, different views of things, and different ways of running the business like you all have done, which has provided so much more opportunity for that little mom and pop shop. So, I hear these stories time and time again in that larger, blue collar industry, manufacturing, construction, the people that are working with their hands. There is a lot of opportunity out there, folks. So put your ear to the ground, because I think you're going to find something if you're looking for it. Camden, what'd you learn?
This is actually really early on. I think this is something we've talked about a bunch in the show. Having that drive towards entrepreneurship, because you get to own your outcome, you get to own that responsibility, was the way you put it, Chris. How important that was to you. And I started thinking that it's such an odd thing that you go from a situation with less stress, move into a situation with more stress, but because you have the ownership of the stress, it's okay. And I just thought that was such an interesting thing. I don't think we've ever brought that thought, all the way around there on the show, Dad. Whereas and I could think, this immediately made me think of one of the business startups I worked with, where I didn't have the final say, and I was still in that stressful startup environment. It was terrible. I was pulling my hair out. And then I've been in probably more stressful business situations since then, where I owned the responsibility and I was sleeping like a baby, because it was mine. I worked my ass off all day, clocked out, went to bed. It wasn't eating away at me anymore, because I owned the responsibility. So that's what I took away from today. That was earlier on. And then also that we got to get Chris back on here and get a little bit more of the blue collar soapbox college and dive into all that stuff, because I think we can have a good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chris, what'd you learn?
Well, I think one of the things I learned was a little bit about your probing questions on the different service lines and how we started them. And as I was answering those questions, I was sort of thinking, like, we had a process in our mind, but we're talking about more now. And I'm thinking, I need to really probably put a little bit more structure around what our process there, because we were shooting from the hip and we had some guide rails that we were sort of managing by, but we continue to have more and more opportunities come. And I think that, I learned that I need to, and we as an organization need to probably formalize that a bit so that we can review them faster and then hopefully make the better decisions on there. So sort of tactical, but definitely still a valuable takeaway for sure.
That's great. That's great. How can folks get in touch with you, Chris? Find out more about what's going on in American Scale, talk to you, etc.
Sure. I'm always on LinkedIn, just Chris Hartman. I'm under American Scale. I'm always on LinkedIn. And then our website, www.americanscaleus.com. You want to check out all the different scales you can get into. And then we're over on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. Lots of pictures of our projects we're working on and other cool stuff. If you like to look at heavy equipment, it's a good place to check out. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's all I need is just another social media distraction for me.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. So Chris, man, it's been great having you on the show today. We appreciate your time and thoughts and sharing with us. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our guest, Chris Hartman, for joining us today, and our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. You can check out recent episodes of The Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam and Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.